My daughter asked me not to come to her graduation. She said I'd ruined the most important day of her life. I'd spent 30 years mopping floors at that university so she could study there. But to her, I was just a janitor. She was ashamed to show her friends. I agreed to stay home. But what happened at that ceremony changed everything forever. The graduation invitation had been sitting on the kitchen table for 3 days. Every morning I looked at that elegant envelope with gold embossing and felt my heart fill with pride. My Emily was finishing university, the same university where I'd worked for the past 30 years. I imagined sitting in the auditorium, seeing her on stage in her academic gown. Watching her receive the diploma I'd helped her earn with every tile I mopped, every toilet I cleaned, every night shift when my hands hurt so badly I couldn't fall asleep. But when Emily came home that evening, her face was tense. She didn't even take off her coat, just stood in the hallway looking at me like she was trying to find the right words for something really unpleasant. She started talking around it. She went on about what an important day it was, how all her friends would be there, professors, Brandon's family. His parents were influential people in town. And then she said it. She asked me not to come to the ceremony. Her voice was quiet, but the words hit like slaps. She said it would be better for her, that I'd understand, that it didn't mean anything, just that there'd be too many people and she'd be uncomfortable. But I saw the truth in her eyes. I knew the real reason. Emily was ashamed of me, of her mother, the woman who'd raised her alone after her father left when she was 2, the woman who worked 2 jobs so she could go to a good school, who put on a janitor's uniform every day so her daughter could have a future. I looked down at my hands. The skin was red and cracked from cleaning chemicals, nails cut short, no polish. These hands had scrubbed, washed, and cleaned for 30 years. These hands had held her when she was a baby. These hands had written checks for her tuition, books, dorm room. But to Emily, they were just a janitor's hands. I could have said no, could have insisted on my right to be at my only daughter's graduation. But when I saw her face, full of hope that I'd agree, something inside me broke. I nodded, said I understood, that it was fine. The relief on her face was so obvious, it physically hurt. I didn't sleep at all the night before graduation. I lay there staring at the ceiling, remembering holding Emily in my arms for the first time, teaching her to walk, read, count, how she proudly walked to 1st grade with a new backpack I'd been saving up for 3 months to buy. I remembered her 14th birthday when she cried because we didn't have money for a party like the other kids. I took an extra shift and bought her that bike she'd been dreaming about. I remembered the day the letter came from the university with the acceptance offer, how she jumped all over the apartment, how she hugged me, how she said I was the best mom in the world. That was only 4 years ago. How quickly everything had changed. At 10 in the morning, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. Usually I didn't answer unknown calls, but something made me pick up. The voice on the other end was official and polite. A woman introduced herself as the university president's assistant. She asked if I was planning to come to the ceremony. I was confused. Why was the president's office calling me? I started explaining that I didn't have an invitation, that my daughter had asked me not to come, but the woman interrupted me. Her voice became softer. She said she understood the situation, but insisted that I come. She said there would be a seat reserved for me, a special seat, and that it was very important. Her tone didn't allow for objections. Before I could answer, she gave me the address and hung up. Something inside me, some spark of self-respect that I thought I lost long ago, suddenly flared up. I'd spent 30 years of my life, so Emily could get an education. And even if she didn't want to see me there, I had a right to be present. The university campus was packed with people. I felt like an outsider. At the entrance, I was met by the same woman who'd called. She smiled, introduced herself as Maria, and led me inside. She didn't take me to the regular seats, but to a row separated by a velvet rope. She pointed to a seat in the third row and quietly said the president had asked me to stay after the ceremony. The ceremony started with a speech from the president. Dr. James Collins talked about the university's achievements, the graduates, the future. They started handing out diplomas. One by one, students walked up on stage. I waited for Emily's turn. My heart was beating so fast I was afraid the people next to me could hear it. Finally, they announced her name. Emily Roberts. My daughter stood up and walked to the stage. She looked beautiful in her academic gown. She was smiling wide. I couldn't hold back tears. Despite everything that had happened, I was still incredibly proud of her. She shook hands with the president, received her diploma, turned to the auditorium, and in that moment her eyes accidentally swept across the rows and stopped on me. I saw her smile freeze, saw surprise flash in her eyes, then confusion, then something like annoyance. She quickly turned away and walked off the stage. I felt sick. I'd ruined her moment, exactly like she'd been afraid of. After all the diplomas were handed out, the president came back on stage. He asked everyone to stay in their seats because he had a special announcement. The hall went quiet. Dr. Collins started talking about the university's history, about how it was founded with a mission to make education accessible to everyone, about the importance of philanthropy. And then the president said that today he wanted to publicly thank a person who for the past 30 years had been the university's largest private donor, a person who donated millions of dollars but always asked to remain anonymous. My heart skipped a beat. The president continued. He talked about a foundation that funded scholarships for students from low-income families, about money that went to renovating dorms, buying equipment, developing the library, about hundreds of students who'd been able to get an education because of this support. He said this person had always refused public recognition, but today he'd gotten permission to reveal the name. Documents appeared on the huge screen, bank transfers, letters, photographs, and my name, Margaret Roberts. The hall froze in absolute silence. Every head turned, searching for me. The president asked me to stand. 30 years ago, when my husband left, abandoning me alone with 2-year-old Emily, I was on the edge of despair. No money, no education, no prospects. I got a job as a janitor at the university because it was the only work I could find. But the university had a program for employees. Any worker could take free courses in their spare time. I started studying at night. First basic things, then more complex stuff. Business, finance, investing. 5 years later, I finished an MBA program. 10 years later, I launched my own small investment business. I worked as a janitor during the day, and in evenings and nights, I managed my investments. Nobody knew. Not even Emily knew. I didn't want her to feel the difference between us and other families. I wanted her to value education, work, effort. My investments were successful, very successful. After 20 years, I had millions, but I kept living the same way, kept working as a janitor, kept wearing cheap clothes and economizing on everything. And the money I gave to the university, anonymously, through a foundation I created, because this university had given me a chance. And I wanted to give that same chance to others. The president told all of this. He said that today I was here not just as a graduate's mother, but as the person thanks to whom a third of the students in this hall had been able to get an education. The hall erupted in applause. People stood up. The ovation was deafening. I sat there unable to move, unable to breathe. Maria came over and gently took my hand. I stood on shaking legs. The applause got even louder. I looked out at the hall and saw Emily. She was standing with everyone else, but not applauding. Her face was white as a sheet. Her eyes were huge with shock. Her mouth was hanging open. She was looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time in her life. Maria led me onto the stage. The president shook my hand. His eyes were moist. He handed me a beautiful plaque with my name engraved on it. He asked me to say a few words. I walked up to the microphone. My voice trembled when I started speaking. I said I'd never planned for anyone to know about this, that it was important to me to help, not to get recognition, that education had changed my life, and I wanted it to change other people's lives. I said that working as a janitor was never humiliating for me, that it was honest work that allowed me to feed my daughter while studying, that I was proud of every floor I mopped because it was part of my journey. I said that wealth isn't measured by money, but by what we do for others. That real success isn't what we accumulate, but what we give away. And I said that my greatest achievement was my daughter, Emily, who I was prouder of than anything else in this world. When I finished, the hall was silent, and then applause broke out again. But I wasn't hearing it anymore. I was only looking at Emily. When the ceremony ended, people surrounded me. Parents came up to thank me. Students who'd studied on scholarships from my foundation were crying and hugging me. And then I saw her pushing through to me. Emily. Her face was wet with tears. People stepped aside, letting her through. She stopped in front of me. We stood face to face, mother and daughter, janitor and graduate, philanthropist and scholarship recipient. Because I only now realized that Emily had been studying on a scholarship from my foundation. She'd been getting a scholarship, not knowing the money came from her own mother. She'd studied on my money, lived in a dorm renovated with my money, used a library equipped with my money, and all the while, she'd been ashamed of me. Emily opened her mouth but couldn't say anything. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her hands were shaking. She looked lost, broken. I could have said so much to her, could have expressed all the pain I'd been holding inside, could have asked why I wasn't good enough, why my sacrifices meant nothing. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I just opened my arms, and Emily, sobbing, fell into my embrace. She held me so tight, tighter than she had in years. Her body shook with tears. She was repeating something incoherent, but I understood. She was saying she was sorry, over and over, that she was so sorry. 6 months passed since that day. Emily moved back home. She broke up with Brandon. Turned out when his family found out about my wealth, they suddenly became very interested in continuing the relationship. But Emily saw their true faces, just like she saw her own. We talked a lot during those months. She told me how she'd started feeling inadequate at university, how other students talked about money, travel, things she'd never had, how she started lying about her background, how shame gradually ate away at her from inside. Emily started volunteering at my charity foundation. She helped students who were in the same situation she'd been in. I finally quit my job as a janitor. Not because I was ashamed of it, but because at 60 my body couldn't handle the physical work anymore. We started spending evenings together, like when she was little, cooking dinner, watching movies, talking, real conversations. Emily told me about her dreams. Turned out law had never really interested her. It was a choice dictated by wanting to fit into Brandon's circle. Her real passion was education. She wanted to work with kids from disadvantaged families. She asked me why I kept working as a janitor when I already had millions, why I lived in this small apartment, why I wore cheap clothes and economized on everything. I told her that money changes people. I'd seen it over and over. People who suddenly got money lost touch with reality. Working as a janitor kept me grounded. It reminded me every day where I came from, and I wanted Emily to grow up with those same values. I was afraid that if she knew about my wealth, she'd become spoiled, lazy, dependent. Now I understood it was a mistake. My attempt to protect her from one extreme led to another. She grew up ashamed of her background instead of being proud of it. I took her hands in mine, my old, rough hands holding her young, smooth hands. I said I forgave her, completely and unconditionally, that she was young, that she'd made a mistake, but mistakes are part of life. I said I was proud of her, not for the diploma, not for the grades. I was proud of her for being able to admit her mistake, for finding the strength to change direction. We held each other and both cried. These weren't tears of pain. These were tears of liberation. Liberation from lies, from shame, from expectations that had been suffocating us both. 3 months after graduation, I returned to the university as an honorary member of the Board of Trustees. I wanted to continue personally meeting with students who received scholarships from my foundation. Emily got a job at a nonprofit organization that helped kids from low-income families get access to education. The salary was modest, but when she came home after work, her eyes shone like I hadn't seen in years. One day, I received a letter from a girl named Sarah. She wrote that she was studying on a scholarship from my foundation, that without this help, she never could have afforded university, that my story had inspired her. At the end of the letter, she thanked me, not just for the money, but for the example, for proof that your background doesn't determine your destiny. That night, I showed the letter to Emily. She read it silently, then looked up at me. There was pride in her eyes. She said she wanted to continue my work, that someday she'd take over managing the foundation, that she'd help those who needed it, give chances to those who didn't have them. I looked at my daughter, at the woman she'd become, not perfect but honest, not without mistakes, but willing to learn from them. I thought about that day when she asked me not to come to graduation, about the pain I felt, about the shame she experienced. It seemed like that was in another life. We'd come a long way since that day, a journey from pain to forgiveness, from shame to pride, from separation to reunion. Now, as I tell this story, I'm 61 years old. I think about everything that happened. I learned a few important things in my life. First, dignity doesn't depend on the work you do. A janitor can have more dignity than a CEO. It all depends on how you treat others and yourself. Second, shame is poison that corrodes relationships. When we're ashamed of our background, our parents, our past, we cut ourselves off from our roots. Third, forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength. It means letting go of pain and giving yourself and the other person a chance to start again. Fourth, real wealth isn't in money, it's in relationships, in knowing you change someone's life for the better. And finally, a mother's love is the strongest force in the world, even when it's not valued, even when it's neglected, even when it's shamed. It continues to exist. It continues to give. It continues to hope. My daughter hurt me, but she also gave me the greatest joy in life. She was the reason I worked so hard, the reason I never gave up. And now, looking at her, at the woman she's become, I know every sacrifice was worth it. Every sleepless night, every aching back, every humiliation, every tear. Because in the end, love wins. Always.